Dr. Kim floated silently near the large window of his research ship. The stars shone bright against the darkness of space, but his eyes were fixed on something much more interesting. An ancient fleet of human battleships hung suspended before him, trapped in a strange bubble of twisted space and time. "Dr. Kim, you need to see this," called Park from her station at the scanner controls. Her voice trembled with excitement. Kim pushed off from the window and glided across the cabin to her side. The ship's artificial gravity was set low to conserve power this far from Confederation space. "The readings are clear," Park said, pointing to the display. "These ships are at least 1 million years old. They date back to when humans first traveled between stars." Kim stared at the numbers, his heart racing. Most artifacts from that era were dust or fragments at best. An entire fleet, seemingly intact, was beyond valuable. It was the find of a lifetime. "Are you certain?" he asked, though he knew Park rarely made mistakes. "Multiple scans confirm it," she replied. "These ships were built during Earth's United Defense Force period, before humans even met other intelligent life." The main communication panel flashed with an incoming message. Kim glanced at it and frowned. Confederation Command was sending yet another warning to withdraw from this sector. "They don't understand what we found," he muttered. The ship's captain, a tall woman named Yoon, drifted over to join them. "Command is getting insistent," she said. "They claim this region has unusual energy readings they can't explain." "Of course it does," Kim replied, gesturing toward the fleet. "That's a temporal pocket holding million-year-old warships. I'd be worried if it didn't have strange energy readings." A soft beep from Park's console drew their attention. "I've completed the structural analysis," she announced. "The flagship appears to have functioning airlocks and possibly intact internal atmosphere." Kim's eyes widened. "We need to board it." Captain Yoon shook her head. "Command explicitly ordered." "This is the oldest intact human technology ever discovered," Kim interrupted. "We can't just walk away." The communication panel flashed again, more urgently this time. "They're threatening to revoke our research license," Yoon warned. Kim looked back at the ancient fleet, hanging motionless in space. History waited inside those ships. The answers to questions scholars had debated for centuries. "Tell them we're experiencing communication difficulties," he said finally. "We'll need at least 12 hours to investigate before we can safely depart." Yoon hesitated, then nodded slowly. 12 hours, not a minute more. Kim turned to his team of 5 researchers who had gathered nearby. He could see the mixture of excitement and fear on their faces. These ships were built for war, in a time when humanity fought for survival rather than cooperation. "Prepare the boarding shuttles," he ordered. "Full environmental suits, and everyone carries scanning equipment. We stay together at all times." As his team rushed to obey, Kim returned to the viewport. The flagship was massive, dwarfing their research vessel. Its hull was dark, marked with symbols barely visible after 1 million years. Park joined him, her equipment already strapped to her suit. "What do you think we'll find inside?" she asked quietly. "Knowledge," Kim replied. "Maybe weapons technology the Confederation has forgotten or banned. Perhaps navigation data from unexplored regions. Or nothing but empty corridors and dead computers," Park added. Kim smiled. "That's why we look, to know for certain." The boarding team assembled in the shuttle bay. Kim checked each person's equipment himself, ensuring no safety protocols were overlooked. Ancient ships might contain unknown dangers. "Everyone remember," he said as they boarded the shuttle, "we observe and record. Touch nothing unless absolutely necessary." The small craft detached from the research vessel and moved slowly toward the flagship. As they approached, Kim could make out the name painted on the massive hull. "Dauntless. We're making history today," he told his nervous crew as the shuttle aligned with what appeared to be an entry port. The first beings to set foot on these ships in 1 million years. Park operated the scanning equipment one final time. "I'm detecting faint power signatures inside. That should be impossible after so long." Kim felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with his suit's temperature. Perhaps not everything aboard is as dead as we assumed. The shuttle's docking mechanism engaged with a solid thunk against the ancient airlock. History awaited them inside, but as the airlock began to cycle, Kim wondered if they were truly prepared for what they might awaken. The metal floor rang hollowly beneath Kim's boots as he led his team into the ancient ship. Their lights cut through darkness that had remained undisturbed for 1,000,000 years. The air in their suits felt suddenly thin as the enormity of their discovery settled upon them. Atmosphere reading shows trace oxygen, Park whispered over the comm. Impossible after so long. Kim moved forward cautiously. The corridor stretched before them, its walls lined with strange symbols and darkened display panels. He brushed his gloved fingers against one wall, wiping away a fine layer of dust. The preservation is remarkable, he said. This temporal pocket must have significantly slowed the passage of time inside. As Kim's team advanced deeper into the ship, they failed to notice the subtle activation of sensors embedded in the corridor walls. Their movement, their heat signatures, their voices, all registered as data points in systems that had waited patiently for eons. Park stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. I'm detecting power fluctuations. Something's changing. The floor beneath them vibrated slightly, and distant mechanical sounds echoed through the ship. Lights flickered weakly along the ceiling, casting strange shadows across the ancient metal. We should return to the shuttle, suggested Jin, the team's safety officer. Kim shook his head. Not yet. This is exactly what we came to study. The ship is responding to our presence. Deep within the vessel's core, ancient computer systems stirred to life. Emergency protocols activated in sequence, checking ship integrity, life support, and crew status. Detecting unfamiliar life forms aboard, the ship's defensive AI awakened further systems according to pre-programmed priorities. Several decks below the research team, in a vast chamber filled with rows of sleek metal pods, status lights began to change from dormant red to active green. Officer Lee had been dreaming of Earth, of blue skies and open fields, when cold reality crashed into her consciousness. Her cryopod slid open with a hiss of escaping gases, and she gasped as her lungs burned with their first breath in what felt like seconds. Her body felt heavy, her mind sluggish as it struggled to process information. The chamber around her was dimly lit with emergency lighting. She blinked, trying to focus. The ship's chronometer on the wall caught her attention, and her heart nearly stopped. The time display made no sense. According to the ship's systems, she had been asleep far longer than the planned 6-month journey. Lee struggled to sit up, her muscles protesting every movement. Around her, other pods were beginning their wake sequences, indicators changing color as their occupants stirred to life. Status report, she croaked, her voice barely functioning after its long disuse. The nearest display flickered and showed a security feed. Strange beings in unfamiliar suits walking through the ship's corridors. Fear shot through her. The harvesters had boarded. They had failed. Lee forced herself from the pod, stumbling as her legs nearly gave way beneath her. She had to reach Captain Han. As an officer, his pod was in a separate chamber adjacent to the main cryobay. She dragged herself forward, using the wall for support. Other crew members were beginning to emerge from their pods, confused and disoriented. Their questions echoed behind her, but Lee pushed onward. The door to the captain's chamber slid open at her approach. Inside, Captain Han's pod was already in its final wake sequence. Lee stumbled to his side just as his eyes opened. Captain Han, she called, her voice stronger now. Something's wrong. We weren't supposed to wake yet. Han's eyes focused slowly on her face. Officer Lee, he murmured. Report. Unknown entities have boarded the ship, she said. The AI has initiated emergency revival protocols. Han sat up sharply, then grimaced at the pain the sudden movement caused. The harvesters? I don't think so, Lee replied. The intruders appeared different, almost human-shaped. The captain's pod completed its diagnostic sequence, and Han checked the readout. His face paled. According to the ship's chronometer, he said slowly, we've been in stasis for. He trailed off, unable to speak the number. It can't be right, Lee insisted. The pods weren't designed to sustain life for. A loud alarm cut through the ship, and emergency lights bathed the room in red. The defense systems had fully activated. We need to get to the bridge, Han said, pushing himself to his feet. Whatever's happening, we need to take control before the AI does something we'll regret. As they moved toward the door, they heard the unmistakable sound of the ship's weapons systems powering up. Kim found himself surrounded by 6 armed soldiers in old-style military uniforms. Their weapons pointed steadily at him and his team. The researchers stood with their hands raised, environmental suits now open to show they were human. I say again, we are researchers from the Galactic Confederation. Kim explained slowly. We found your ship preserved in a temporal anomaly. The soldiers' expressions remained hard and suspicious. One woman, with officer insignia that Kim didn't recognize, kept her weapon trained on his chest while speaking into a small device on her wrist. Minutes later, the standoff ended with the arrival of a tall man whose uniform marked him as the highest-ranking officer present. The soldiers stepped aside respectfully. I am Captain Han of the Earth Defense Fleet, the man said. His voice carried authority despite the confusion in his eyes. You claim to be human, yet you arrived with non-human signatures according to our sensors. Our equipment has changed significantly, Kim explained. Captain, there's something you need to understand. He hesitated, unsure how to deliver such shocking news. Your ship and fleet have been trapped in a temporal stasis field for approximately 1 million years. Captain Han's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped a nearby console. That's not possible, he said flatly. The pods were designed for extended deployment, but not. I understand this is difficult to accept, Kim interrupted gently. But we've dated your vessels using multiple methods. Human civilization has gone through many phases since your time. We've met other intelligent species, formed alliances, built a shared government called the Galactic Confederation. Han stared at him, struggling to process the explanation. 1 million years, Han repeated, his voice hoarse. And humans are just one species among many now. Kim nodded slowly. Earth is still our homeworld, but humanity has colonies across thousands of systems. We've evolved, changed our social structures. The wars you fought are ancient history taught to schoolchildren. Officer Lee stepped forward. If what you're saying is true, what happened to the harvesters? The enemy we were fighting? Before Kim could answer, the ship shuddered slightly. Lights brightened across control panels around them. The automated defense systems are activating, Han said, moving quickly to a central console. Something's triggered full battle readiness. Park looked at her scanning device with alarm. The temporal pocket is completely dissolved. The entire fleet is now sensing the surrounding space and perceiving potential threats. Han's fingers moved across the controls, but many displays remained unresponsive. The AI is overriding manual commands. It's following emergency protocols. Across the galaxy, on the Confederation's Central Command Station, alarms blared through the monitoring center. Admiral Song rushed to the main display where technicians worked frantically at their stations. Report, Song demanded. The ancient fleet has begun powering weapons systems, a technician explained. We're detecting energy signatures that match no known configuration in our database. Another officer looked up from her station, face pale. Analysis complete. Those ships are using quantum destabilization technology. Admiral Song's eyes widened. That's impossible. We banned that 800,000 years ago. The readings are clear, the officer insisted. Those weapons could tear apart the fabric of space-time itself. Even our most advanced defensive systems have no countermeasures for this technology. Song moved to the communication station. Open an emergency channel to Dr. Kim's team. We need to establish contact with whoever's controlling those ships before they accidentally destroy half the sector. Back on the Dauntless, Kim watched as Captain Han and his crew struggled to regain control of their own systems. Your ship perceives the Confederation monitoring satellites as potential threats, Kim explained. You must shut down the weapons before they'd fully activate. I'm trying, Han said through gritted teeth, but the AI believes we're still at war. Officer Lee looked up from another console. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from a human admiral. Han nodded. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Song's face. Han stared in shock at the subtle differences in the human before him. the slight changes in facial structure that a million years of evolution had created. This is Admiral Song of the Galactic Confederation. The transmission began. Captain Han, your weapon systems are targeting civilian installations. We need you to power down immediately. Han straightened his shoulders, the weight of his responsibility visible in his stance. Admiral, my crew has just learned we've been asleep for a million years. We're having trouble believing it, let alone controlling our own ship. I understand, Song replied calmly. But those quantum destabilizers could cause catastrophic damage if fired. That technology was banned long ago for good reason. Han looked at Kim. Is there any evidence the harvesters still exist? The question hung in the air as all eyes turned to the xenorchaeologist. The conference room aboard the Dauntless felt strange with its mixture of ancient military design and temporary equipment brought by Kim's team. The metal table was scratched from centuries of microscopic dust particles moving across its surface in the temporal pocket. Around it sat an unlikely group. Captain Han and his senior officers alongside Kim and Park, with Admiral Song joining via holographic projection. After several tense hours, Han had managed to convince the ship's AI to stand down its weapons. Now came the harder task: understanding what had really happened a million years ago. Let me show you why we were out here, Han said, his fingers moving across the old control panel with practiced ease. The room darkened as a three-dimensional display flickered to life above the table. Stars and planets appeared, with 17 red markers scattered across different systems. We were humanity's last defense, Han explained to Kim as they reviewed the old mission logs. The harvesters had already destroyed 17 colonies. The display zoomed in on one of the red markers, showing a planet being systematically taken apart by swarms of metallic entities. They weren't interested in conquering, Officer Lee added. They harvested everything: metals, organics, even the planet's core. Nothing was left but debris fields. Admiral Song leaned forward in his projected image. Our historical records mention the Harvester War, but details are vague. It's described as humanity's first major interstellar conflict, ending when both sides mysteriously vanished. We didn't vanish, Han said firmly. We had a plan. Officer Lee pulled up battle footage, showing mechanical entities dismantling entire planets for resources. The images were disturbing. Cities being methodically disassembled, oceans drained and processed, mountains reduced to raw materials. They weren't alive in any way we understand, Lee continued, her voice steady despite the horror on the screen. They operated like a virus. Consume, replicate, spread. Our conventional weapons barely slowed them down. The footage changed to show Earth scientists working frantically in laboratories. That's when the temporal weapon was developed, Han said. A desperate measure for a desperate time. Kim watched as the screen showed schematics for a device embedded in the heart of the Dauntless and its sister ships. Our mission was simple, Lee said. Draw them into the gravity well, activate the time dilation drive, and trap them between moments. We thought we failed. The display showed the battle fleet engaging a massive swarm of the mechanical entities near a dense star cluster. There was a blinding flash as the temporal weapon activated, then nothing. The last thing I remember was giving the order to activate, Han said quietly, then waking up to find your team aboard my ship. Admiral Song's hologram looked troubled. According to our records, after that battle, the harvesters were never seen again. It was assumed both sides destroyed each other. Kim had been unusually quiet, studying the technical readouts of the temporal weapon with growing concern. He looked up, his expression darkened. But what if you didn't fail? Kim said slowly. What if you just displaced them, temporarily? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Explain, Han demanded. Kim stood and walked to the display, pointing to the schematics. This weapon wasn't designed to destroy. It was designed to remove the target from normal spacetime flow, to trap them between moments, as Officer Lee said. Yes, that was the intention, Han agreed. But your own ship was caught in the effect, Kim continued. Instead of being destroyed, you were preserved in a temporal pocket for 1,000,000 years. What if the same thing happened to the harvesters? Park, who had been analyzing data on her pad, looked up sharply. The temporal physics would be symmetrical. If the fleet was preserved, logic suggests the harvesters would also be preserved in their own temporal pocket. But we found no evidence of them when we discovered your fleet, Kim added. Because they weren't there, Lee realized, her face paling. The weapon would have affected different targets differently based on their position relative to the activation point. Han stood suddenly. You're suggesting the harvesters could still exist, trapped in another temporal anomaly that might dissolve at any time, just as ours did. Admiral Song's hologram flickered as he received information from his staff. Dr. Kim, we've been detecting unusual temporal disturbances in several sectors over the past year. They were dismissed as natural phenomena, but given this new information, we need to check those disturbances immediately, Kim said urgently. If the harvesters are awakening after 1,000,000 years, the Confederation has no weapons that could stop them. Han exchanged glances with Officer Lee before turning to Admiral Song. We do. Your 1,000,000-year-old fleet? Admiral Song asked skeptically. The same weapons that stopped them before, Han confirmed. And the only people who know how to fight them. Kim watched as determination replaced confusion on the faces of Han's crew. These people had been ready to die fighting a terrible enemy 1,000,000 years ago. Now they might have to do it all over again. 3 days had passed since the discovery of the ancient fleet. The Confederation had sent additional research and diplomatic teams to study the 1,000,000-year-old vessels and help the awakened humans adjust to their new reality. Captain Han and his crew remained aboard the Dauntless, which had become a strange meeting point between past and present. In the ship's main conference room, Captain Han sat across from Admiral Song, who had arrived in person after the initial communication. Between them lay plans for integrating the ancient crew into modern society. Your people have 2 options, Admiral Song explained. They can be relocated to Earth or one of the core worlds, where they'll receive education and assistance adapting to modern society. Or they can join the Confederation fleet with ranks that match their experience. Han stared at the datapad showing images of modern Earth, a planet that shared only its shape with the home he remembered. Gleaming cities stretched into the clouds, with green spaces carefully preserved between them. It was beautiful but utterly foreign. My crew trained for war, Han said quietly. We were soldiers, not explorers or diplomats. The Confederation hasn't fought a true war in over 200,000 years, Song replied. We maintain a defense force, but its primary mission is rescue, disaster relief, and scientific exploration. Han was about to respond when the door slid open with a bang. Technician Choi rushed in, his face pale with urgency. The young man had been working with the Confederation team to analyze the ancient ship's data systems. Sir, the old beacons are activating, Choi reported, placing a portable projector on the table. It displayed a galaxy map with pulsing red dots scattered across several sectors. The pattern matches the harvester communication protocols from our database. Han rose so quickly his chair tipped over. That's impossible. Those beacons were deactivated 1,000,000 years ago. They're definitely active now, Choi insisted. And they're using the exact frequency patterns from our records. Admiral Song studied the map with growing concern. These locations correspond to the temporal anomalies we've been tracking. Han's face drained of color as he studied the pattern of activations. They're not just returning. They've been rebuilding this entire time. What do you mean? Kim asked from his position near the door. The xenorchaeologist hadn't left the ship since the discovery. The harvesters operate like a virus, Han explained, pointing to the pattern of signals. They send out components that lie dormant until activated. This pattern suggests they've been seeding parts of themselves throughout the galaxy, waiting for a signal to reassemble. Song looked grim. Our modern weapons can't touch them. We've evolved past that kind of destructive capacity. The Admiral's words hung in the air. The Confederation had spent centuries developing technologies that preserved life rather than destroyed it. Their weapons were designed to disable and contain, not annihilate. How long do we have? Han asked, his military training taking over. Choi studied the data streaming across his pad. Based on the signal patterns, the first harvester units will fully activate within 72 hours. Han turned to Admiral Song. You need to evacuate the systems nearest to these activation points. The harvesters will begin consuming resources immediately. That's millions of people across dozens of worlds, Song protested. Better they flee than be processed along with their planets, Han said grimly. Officer Lee, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. Admiral, I've spent the last 2 days studying your Confederation defensive capabilities. You have impressive technology, but nothing designed to face a threat like this. What are you suggesting? Song asked. Our fleet, Han answered. The Dauntless and her sister ships. They were built specifically to fight the harvesters. Song shook his head. Your vessels are ancient technology. Half your systems barely function. The weapons work, Han countered. We checked, and we have the tactical knowledge to use them effectively. Kim, who had been unusually quiet, looked up from his datapad. Admiral, I've been reviewing historical records. The reason quantum destabilization technology was banned wasn't just its destructive potential. It was banned because it was the only effective weapon against the harvesters. After they disappeared, that knowledge was deliberately suppressed. Is that true? Han demanded, turning to Song. The Admiral's silence was answer enough. Why would humanity abandon its only defense against such a threat? Lee asked. Because we wanted to forget, Song finally said. The Harvester War nearly destroyed early human civilization. When both sides vanished, humanity chose a different path, one of cooperation and creation rather than destruction. Han placed both hands flat on the table. That choice may have doomed us all. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 1,000,000 years separated these two groups of humans, yet they now faced the same enemy, an enemy the modern Confederation was unprepared to fight. How quickly can your fleet be made battle-ready? Song asked finally. Give me 48 hours, Han replied, and every engineer you can spare. The space above the colony world Novoterra shimmered as the massive form of the Dauntless broke through the jump point. The ancient battleship's hull was scared and patched, but its weapons gleamed with deadly purpose. Behind it, 4 more ships from the 1,000,000-year-old fleet emerged, their engines glowing hot after hasty repairs. Captain Han stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching as his tactical display filled with friendly markers. The Confederation had sent 12 of their most advanced vessels to join his small fleet. The contrast between the ships was striking. Han's vessels were bulky, angular, and bristling with weapons, while the Confederation ships were sleek, curved, and elegant. All ships in position. Officer Lee reported from her station. Weapons are hot and ready. Han nodded. Open a channel to Admiral Song. The main screen flickered to life, showing the Admiral aboard his flagship, the Harmony. The modern command center behind him looked more like a luxury hotel than a warship's bridge. The ancient battleship Dauntless moved into position alongside the sleek Confederation vessels. Their disparate designs highlighted the vast technological gap, one built for efficient destruction, the others for diplomatic show and scientific exploration. We're picking up temporal distortions, Song reported. Your predictions were correct. The harvesters will emerge here first. Remember the plan, Han said. Your ships stay behind the gravity well. Mine will engage directly. Your job is to evacuate civilians if we fail. Song frowned. My vessels have advanced shields. We should. Your ships are beautiful, Han interrupted. But they weren't built for this. We were. The Admiral looked like he wanted to argue, but simply nodded instead. The colony is almost fully evacuated. We've left automated beacons to attract the harvesters away from populated areas. Good, Han replied. We want them focused on resource collection. That's when they're most vulnerable. He paused, studying the readouts. Admiral, I notice your targeting systems are painting individual harvester units. Of course, Song replied. Our precision targeting can disable threats with minimal collateral damage. Han smiled thinly. Your targeting systems are primitive. Admiral Song told Han over the comm. Song raised an eyebrow. Primitive. Our quantum lock targeting can hit a specific circuit on a moving ship from half a system away. Han smiled thinly. Sometimes primitive is exactly what you need. The harvesters function as a collective. Targeting individuals is useless. You need to hit their command nodes, which hide behind the worker units. Before Song could respond, the tactical officer on Han's bridge called out, "Captain, temporal rupture forming." Han turned to his crew. "Battle stations. This is what we trained for." The crew of the Dauntless moved with practiced efficiency, despite having been frozen for 1,000,000 years. For them, the Harvester War had ended just days ago. The muscle memory remained. Space tore open in a flash of sickly green light. Through the rupture came the Harvesters, thousands of metallic, spider-like machines ranging from the size of a human hand to massive processor units as large as small moons. They moved as one swarm, already spreading out to begin their consumption of the planet below. "They've evolved," Lee said quietly, studying the sensor data. "Their outer shells are more efficient, but the basic design is unchanged." Han nodded. "Same weakness, then. Target the command nodes. Full spread, pattern delta." As the first wave of Harvester ships emerged from subspace, Lee took her position at the weapons console. "For Earth," she whispered, "even if it's no longer the home we knew." The Dauntless shuddered as its main weapons discharged, not the precise, surgical strikes of Confederation technology, but devastating waves of quantum destabilization energy that tore through space itself. The effect was immediate. Hundreds of Harvester units simply ceased to exist as the fabric of space-time around them collapsed. Others spun wildly, their coordination disrupted by the attack on their hidden command nodes. Admiral Song watched in stunned silence from the Harmony. "Incredible," he murmured. "They knew exactly where to hit." The remaining Harvester units regrouped quickly, their collective intelligence adapting to the threat. They surged toward the Dauntless, ignoring the Confederation vessels as if they posed no threat at all. "Second wave approaching," Lee called out. "They're adapting their formation." Han remained calm, just as they did at Proxima Centauri. "Switch to pattern Epsilon. Target their new command structure." The ancient fleet moved with surprising agility, taking positions that seemed random to observers, but followed battle plans developed through bitter experience 1,000,000 years ago. "Admiral Song," Han called over the comm, "we're going to create an opening. When we do, hit this coordinate with everything you have." He transmitted the targeting data. Song looked confused. "There's nothing there." "Trust me," Han replied, then turned to his weapons officer. "Lee, initiate the Theseus protocol." Lee's fingers danced across her console, and the ancient weapons of the Dauntless sang once more. This time, instead of destroying Harvester units, the quantum field created a temporary bubble of altered physics. "Now, Admiral," Han shouted. The Confederation ships fired their elegant, precise weapons at the empty space Han had indicated. As their energy beams entered the quantum field, they transformed, becoming something even more deadly than their creators had intended. At the heart of the Harvester swarm, a chain reaction began. The silence after battle felt heavy and strange. Where once thousands of Harvester units had swarmed, now only debris floated in cold space. The Dauntless drifted among the wreckage, its hull scared and breached in multiple places. Emergency force fields flickered where holes had been torn through ancient metal. Captain Han stood by the main viewport, watching as Confederation repair drones moved like busy insects around his damaged ship. His face was streaked with blood from a cut above his eye, but he had refused medical attention until all his crew were treated. Of the 5 ships from his ancient fleet that had engaged the Harvesters, only 3 remained. The Valiant and the Defender had been torn apart when the Harvester mothership self-destructed. Hundreds of his people who had already sacrificed 1,000,000 years of their lives, were now truly gone. "Captain." Admiral Song's voice came from behind him. The Confederation officer looked equally battered. His pristine uniform was torn and stained, and his right arm hung in a makeshift sling. Han turned slowly. "Admiral, your ships. The Harmony will need extensive repairs. We lost the Serenity completely." Song's voice was somber. "But the colony is safe. 11 billion lives saved." Han nodded silently. His tactical display showed the battle's aftermath. The ancient fleet surrounded by Harvester debris. Half of Han's ships were destroyed, but the Confederation would have lost everything without them. You reminded us of something we chose to forget, Song told Han as they watched repair drones working on the surviving vessels. Sometimes survival requires strength, not just diplomacy. And sometimes strength requires terrible weapons, Han replied quietly. We built the quantum destabilizers knowing what they could do. We weren't proud of them. Officer Lee entered the bridge, her uniform torn and her face showing exhaustion. She handed Han a datapad with casualty reports. He scanned it quickly, each number another weight on his conscience. The final count. Song asked. 322 of our crew lost. Han answered. Plus your losses. A high price, Song acknowledged, but nothing compared to what would have happened if the harvesters had reached the colony. Dr. Kim joined them, looking out of place on the military bridge. The xenorchaeologist had remained aboard the Dauntless during the battle, helping in the medical bay. The temporal readings are finally stable, Kim reported. The rupture the harvesters emerged from has completely closed. Lee studied her own readings, but we detected at least 3 more potential emergence points forming in other sectors. This was just the first wave. Han looked out at the stars, unfamiliar constellations that had shifted over 1 million years. The sky itself looked alien to him now. Everything he had known was dust. Everyone he had left behind on Earth had been dead for countless generations. What will you do now? Kim asked, breaking the heavy silence. Han opened his mouth to respond, but Lee answered before he could. The harvesters weren't completely destroyed. Someone needs to finish what we started. She glanced at her captain. Even if it takes another 1,000,000 years. Han studied his officer's face. She had been the youngest member of his senior staff, ambitious and brilliant. Now she looked tired but determined. The Confederation will need your knowledge, Song said. We can rebuild your weapons, train our forces in your tactics. Han shook his head slowly. It won't work. The harvesters adapt. They'll recognize Confederation ships, tactics, and technology. They won't expect to see us again. What are you suggesting? Song asked. A small task force, Han replied. My remaining ships and crew. We hunt down the remaining temporal pockets before they can rupture. We finish our mission. That could take years, Kim said. Decades, even. Lee smiled faintly. What's a few decades when you've already lost 1,000,000 years? Admiral Song looked troubled. The Confederation Council will need to approve this. They might not understand the necessity. Then help them understand, Han said firmly. Show them the battle recordings. Let them see what happens when the harvesters are allowed to fully emerge. Through the viewport, they could see the colony world below. Lights were beginning to come back on as evacuees returned to their homes. People who would never know how close they had come to extinction. My people have already given everything once, Han continued. We're willing to do it again. Not for glory or recognition, but because we're already lost in time. This gives us purpose. Kim stepped forward. I want to join you. My expertise in temporal physics could help locate the remaining pockets. Han exchanged glances with Lee, who nodded slightly. It won't be comfortable, Han warned. These ships weren't built for long-term scientific missions. Kim smiled. I've spent my life studying the past. Now I have a chance to help preserve the future. Admiral Song looked between them, then out at the debris field that had once been a harvester swarm. Finally, he straightened, wincing at the pain in his injured arm. I'll take your proposal to the council personally, he promised. Humanity forgot its warriors once. We won't make that mistake again. Han turned back to the stars, to constellations that had shifted while he slept. His home was gone. His time was gone. But his mission remained. The Dauntless lives up to her name, he said quietly. And so will her crew.